All right, welcome to the next lesson on the beginning of World War II for U.S. Wars class. Now this one's going to be focused more on just kind of the latter half of things, how Britain is kind of doesn't get conquered. This whole idea of how does Britain not get conquered? Because it really seems like the whole world at this point, especially when France goes down, everybody thinks it's over. Germany's done it. They've won this whole thing, but Britain just keeps going. In fact, this really ticks Hitler off. So really quickly to get this up here. So now most of these European countries are underneath the grip of Hitler, and notice I'm not talking about Mussolini much, but Mussolini in Italy is also helping out a bit. They set their sights on Britain, and Hitler's actually a bit pissed off here. He actually thinks that once France went down, Britain would just give up. He was totally under the impression that would happen. And it had a lot to do with his kind of racial thinking, his whole idea of Aryan supremacy. He actually views the French as, they're Germanic. They should be in a greater Germanic-controlled Europe that's going to be the dominant power and ethnic group of all the world. So is Britain. Britain has a lot of Germanic to it. In fact, the term Anglo-Saxon, Angles, Jutes, and Saxons were Germanic tribes that settled in the British Isles 1,400 years before this, or 1,400 years before this. So he views them as cousins. He doesn't view the Celtic peoples like the Scottish and the Irish much as cousins, but they're a little bit lower. Like look at me, I'm half Scottish myself. Anyways, I'd be like half on the side that he'd be okay with, and half not on the side he'd be okay with my background. Now, I just lost my train of thought. I apologize. Oh, Hitler's ticked off that the British would just dare not surrender at this point. So it's like, I'm going to take them down. And he comes up with all these reasons why. And if you hear him talk and the way he writes about this and other people around him, they fully believe this. They think that Britain is actually being controlled behind the scenes by the Jews, and maybe even Winston Churchill himself is a Jew. And they have every need to go in and destroy and get the Jews and all the inferior peoples out of that so they can make, again, Europe this pure place. And just crazy talk, essentially. And, of course, we talked about this type of thought process in the Rise of Dictators lesson a little bit earlier. So they come up with this idea of invading Britain. A two-part invasion. Most of it is a seaborne invasion, but they are going to use paratroopers. You see the signs of that there. I'll land on the southern coast of Britain and take out the capital, and just done and done. Seems kind of easy. There's just one major problem. You still got to cross the ocean, the North Sea there, in between Belgium and France versus Britain there to get there. And the British still have the best navy in the world at this point. It's going to be hard to get. The Germans can't punch their way through there. So what do? They decide we're going to take the best air force of the world and put it up against the Navy. But if we're going to do that, then the British Air Force is going to attack our Air Force as we attack the British Navy. So kind of looking, I hope that's making sense in your minds there. So the Germans decide, okay, we need to knock out the British Air Force. Once the British Air Force is knocked out, they won't be able to hurt us when we knock out their Navy. Once we knock out their Navy, we can send all our troop transports across the North Sea, invade, and then it'll be all done. And that was scary to the British, by the way. Winston Churchill knew that if the Germans were able to land a sufficient amount of people into Britain, they did not have the military at that point to repel them. They were going to lose the war at that point. So they had to win the battle in the air. Thus starts what's called the Battle of Britain. This is a months-long battle. It's known as the largest air battle in world history, where the Royal Air Force, the RAF, that's the British Royal Air Force, goes up against the German Luftwaffe. And they're severely outnumbered. The only plus that the British have going for them at this point is that they have some dang good planes. They have planes that actually can stand up, and in some cases a little bit better than the German planes. The planes you're looking at there, you have the German Messerschmitts, the Me-109 on the left, and on the right you see the British Spitfire. I think those are Spitfires. If those are Hurricanes, I'm going to feel dumb. But anyways, the British Royal Air Force. And I shouldn't say that's their only. I was wrong when I said that's the only advantage. What helps them is the idea that they have aircraft that can definitely stand up to the German aircraft. But what really helps them is this. This is their one main advantage. This is what gives them a bit of a one-up. Even though they're outnumbered, because they have a new invention called radar, they can see the Germans coming. They don't see them very far off. In fact, a lot of times only had 5 minutes, 10 minutes max to get in your planes, get up in the air, and go basically take on the German waves and hordes of planes that are coming across to bomb them. This is how it kind of went. The Germans would send these attack forces over, and they would target airfields, they would target factories, they would target barracks that were housed. But the RAF was actually doing a pretty good job as well of always being able to get up in the air. Their Air Force was never destroyed on the ground like everybody else's was. The Polish Air Force destroyed on the ground. Most of the French Air Force destroyed on the ground. Norwegian Air Force, which there wasn't much of it, but destroyed on the ground. Like the Germans were used to always having full air supremacy. This is the first time where a power, the British in this case, were able to stand up to them. Although, even though the RAF was doing significant damage to Luftwaffe, they were also losing a lot of pilots and planes themselves, and the Germans could win that war of attrition, especially since they were destroying the factories. By the way, I'm going to be linking a clip from the movie Pearl Harbor, which actually has some clips in it about the Battle of Britain, and it kind of showing a lot of this stuff into canvas as well. Anyways, that being said, the British were having problems. Like, in fact, they had so many of their airfields destroyed that a lot of private citizens started donating their lawns, like a really rich nobleman, or I shouldn't really say nobleman, kind of aristocratic type of guy who has this huge mansion out in the countryside. It's like, hey, use my front lawn. Have your guys live in my house for a while. Like, you'll actually see that in the clip I show from the movie Pearl Harbor. They're not in an airfield. They're at some guy's house. And so that's the only way they're able to just keep going, you know. Place after place keeps getting destroyed. The Germans seemed to getting the upper hand. Even with radar, it just didn't seem like it was enough. Sorry, I should have had those pictures up a little bit earlier. Just some pictures of this whole thing going on. German Air Force on the left, British Air Force on the right again. But radar was definitely help. Oh, by the way, another thing that helped out the British, they had a lot of American volunteers come over and help out. America was trying to stay out of the war at this point, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or FDR, the President of the United States at the time, was like, we're not helping out. We just have a lot of American guys going over there right now. But anyways, so what turns things around is when an accident happens. Just a straight up accident happens. The British, trying to not help the Germans in any way, bomb their stuff, and especially at nighttime, would turn all their lights off. So the Germans couldn't see what they were bombing necessarily. So the Germans weren't paying attention to the navigation maps well enough, and a lot of times they'd miss their targets in these night raids. Well, during one night raid, where they were supposed to hit a factory or an industrial area, I believe, I think it was that. Anyways, the target was somewhere near London. One of the German bombers gets 7 miles off course and accidentally bombs St. Paul's Cathedral, a major iconic building in downtown London to this day. And it causes severe damage to it. And by the way, I say accidentally, you know, there's a lot of people that think that this was on purpose, that the Germans definitely did this on purpose, but most evidence points to the idea that this was just a straight up accident. The navigator in the German plane just got off and dropped the bombs in the wrong spot. A lot of things like that happen in war. Friendly fire, stuff like that. Anyways, the British are pissed. We were trying to keep this honorable, only military targets. And we can understand you attacking our airfields, but attacking our civilian targets like a cathedral, especially, a religious place like that, how dare you? So Churchill decides to get some revenge on him, and he sends a bunch of long-range bombers out to Berlin and bombs Berlin. Causes hardly any damage at all, but it just happens that one of the bombs that are dropped lands a couple hundred yards away from where Hitler at the time was watching an opera. And he gets pissed off. He's like, how dare you bomb us? So he decides to change tactics at this point. He's like, you know what? We don't even need to invade Britain. We're going to break the spirit of the British people by bombing their cities. Thus starts what is called the Blitz, where the German Air Force stops attacking military targets and starts attacking civilian targets. Yeah, right here, you get a lot of pictures showing this. Those are the German airplanes not going over military targets, but civilian targets. That's London you're looking at in the bottom left, just getting just destroyed. And in the bottom right, you're seeing a lot of civilians in London hiding out in the subways. The subways turn into makeshift bomb shelters, very good ones. And this backfires very badly on Hitler. He thought that this would break the British people, that they would come clamoring to Churchill saying, surrender, surrender, we don't want to die anymore. Instead, they just get pissed. And they're like, bomb us all you want. We can take it, and we're going to get you. But because Hitler puts all of this, and I'm saying Hitler on purpose because he's the one that made this decision, this was not a good tactic. They should have kept hitting the military targets. They probably would have won this out if they did. One of those what if scenarios. But instead, because of the Blitz, all anti-war sentiment in Britain goes bye-bye. Once he crosses the line and starts attacking civilian targets, anybody in Britain who was like, well, this isn't our war, we should just surrender anyways, and they're kind of more on that side of like, who cares? Now everybody's back is up. They're all willing to contribute to the war effort, and they're like, okay, down with Germany, down with Hitler type thing. How dare you? As well as the factories aren't getting bombed. They start putting out more airplanes. The Americans are sending over more supplies to build more airplanes, getting some more pilots in there. All of a sudden, the RAF gets bigger and starts taking out a heck of a lot more of the German Air Force. And because they have radar, they always see them coming. And now that they have enough planes to take them on, the Germans start losing badly. They lose a lot of guys, a lot of their planes, to where they realize, we got to stop. We just need to stop. And so the British win the Battle of Britain this way. Anyways, that's the end of this lesson. I'll see you in the next one.